Hey everyone, this is Kay, and this is Dark Tales from the Road. Hey everybody, thank you so much for being here today and joining me for another episode. We are in episode 44, and we're going to be heading to Massachusetts, specifically Gardner, Massachusetts, to explore the S.K. Pierce Mansion. Very excited about this one. It is super haunted, so this is going to be a fun one. I'm excited about everything that I learned about Massachusetts because there were some things that I didn't know. I didn't even learn in school. So this is going to be a fun one. Let's go ahead and get started. If you're new here, I like to do history of the state, the city, and then jump into the subject. Just to get a little more background, I love history. I really like doing this. All right, so let's jump into Massachusetts, a little history about it. So the indigenous people of the area, they had been there for over 10,000 years at least. And they used the area for farming, fishing, hunting, and gathering. And it's all a part of what is now Massachusetts. It was one of the original 13 colonies, and Massachusetts is one of the 6 New England states. And that makes New England known as a Commonwealth. But it's the most famous for being the landing place of the Mayflower and the Pilgrims. They arrived in 1620, and they actually left Britain because they really wanted to separate from the Anglican Church and then decided to flee England to the New World. And the explorer that named the place Massachusetts was the colonist John Smith, and he named it after the Massachusetts tribe. So once settlers started coming in like crazy, this was around the 1600s, and they lived there peacefully with the indigenous people. But as we all know, they brought diseases and so many other things with them that they completely wiped them out. 80% of the indigenous population from Rhode Island to Maine was wiped out because of disease. Further on in the 1600s, tens of thousands of immigrants started arriving, and they were all English speaking. And this was known as the New World, and so they were flooding in. And this is where things started to change because they knew they needed government. The massive amounts of culture and different religions on top of what was there already from the indigenous people. They would actually set up they were called, quote, praying plantations. They were for the indigenous people to go to and convert to Christianity. So if you've seen, like recently, the show 1923, there is a Native American character where she is at kind of this compound thing where they are literally converting all of these young girls to Christianity. That's what I pictured when I saw it. But it's like, if you watch this show, there's a lot of abuse, and it's just really sad that they set these up too, just pushing to convert them while they're also desecrating their land and wiping them out with disease. And there was probably conflict, even though it says they worked great together. But where Massachusetts is, it is freaking cold. And the new immigrants had a hard time through the first winter there. About half of them didn't make it. But then they're still working with the tribes. They're still in a good place. And the tribes decided, here, this is how you plant corn. This is how you survive out here, hunting, gathering, and farming. And so then that is the first Thanksgiving. On November 1621, the Pilgrims organized a big feast in Plymouth to celebrate their first successful crop. And so that is why it's known as the first Thanksgiving. The Native American and indigenous people were not invited. And that comes a lot from indigenous historians. They said that they arrived after they started hearing gunfire and fearing that war was breaking. But then they were told, no, it's a harvest celebration. It's, we're putting this on because of this. And so the Native Americans and the indigenous tribes at that time, they actually brought deer to share among all of them. This is amazing, this breakthrough, this settling in the new world. But after that, just centuries of war, diseases continuing to wipe out population. Native American and indigenous people, they actually do not consider Thanksgiving to be a holiday. They actually consider it a day of mourning because of what came after that Thanksgiving together. It's really sad. Now I'm like, oh God. So Boston is the state capital, and it was a huge part of history. We all know how big Boston is, and everybody knows about it. Because they were huge in the American Revolution and they became the sixth state to join the Union. Protests in Boston were huge against the British rule and the different battles of the Revolutionary War and all that. And so some of the protests that they were involved with was the Stamp Act of 1765, and it was the first tax that was levied on Americans by the British. So they protested that. 1767 was the Townshend Acts, which taxed goods coming into the colonies. And that created the 1770 Boston Massacre. And then in 1773 was the Boston Tea Party, one we very much all know about, where they dumped hundreds of chests of tea that was imported from England into the Boston harbor as a political protest. As we all know how big Boston is, it started to grow. All of Massachusetts growing like crazy through the 19th century, but Boston really grew fast as a very industrial city and a port city. They were mainly producing shoes and textiles, which attracted even more immigrants. A lot came from Ireland and Italy. And what's really sad is that they were impoverished. They were illiterate and they had no place to go, so they were in the slums. And then there was so much discrimination against them from, the people born of the original descendants or from Britain and all like that. In the 1800s, there was a huge wave of Irish immigration because of the Irish potato famine. And so it came like in the early to mid 1800s and then came into the late 1800s, early 1900s. And so it said that 1 in 5 residents of Massachusetts is of Irish descent. And it has the most Irish descendants in any city of the country. So along with the Irish also come immigrants from Italy, like southern Italy, Sicily, around the late 1800s and early 1900s. And it's also said that people of Italian descent, they make up 14% of Massachusetts' population today. And so it makes it the 4th most Italian descents in the country. The state is the 4th, yeah. Massachusetts is very much known for a lot of people who grew up there, who became huge in their lifetime, and a lot of innovations. So a lot of people that lived there, there's the poet Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, and Emily Dickinson. And then there were authors like Louise May Alcott and Nathaniel Hawthorne. Then petitions like Horace Mann and JFK. They all came from Massachusetts. If you love Emily Dickinson, I love Emily Dickinson. On Apple Plus TV, there is a series about her, and I think it's quirky and super cute, and I love it. Anyways, just a little tidbit there. So along with all of these people, there's a lot of innovation happening. Like Harvard University opened in 1636. And it was the first institution of higher education that was established in the U.S. And it resides in Cambridge. The typewriter was patented, in 1843 by Charles Thurber. The first telephone was created in Boston by Alexander Graham Bell. That was in 1876. And Boston also has the first subway in the United States, which opened in 1897. Also, fun fact, the chocolate chip cookie was reportedly invented in 1930 at the Toll House restaurant in Whitman, Massachusetts. In 1997, it was designated the official cookie of the Commonwealth. Who doesn't love chocolate chip cookies? All right, just a couple facts here. They got their statehood February 6th of 1788. A man named James Naismith, Dr. James Naismith, he was a PE teacher at the YMCA in Springfield. He actually invented the game of basketball in 1891 to help with his students during the cold winter months to find a physical activity to do inside. And so at first it was played with a soccer ball and 2 peach baskets. And they would nail them 10 feet above the floor. And that's how the game of basketball started. I don't know if that's the only story. There's probably a bunch more, but that's what I found out. And also, volleyball was invented in Holyoke, Massachusetts in 1895. A man named William G. Morgan. He was the director of the YMCA. And it was originally known as Mintonette. I hope I said that right. That is the original name of volleyball. So it was intended to be like a less intense version of basketball mixed with baseball, handball, and tennis. And so over the years, the rules were refined and changed, and it actually debuted in the Olympic Games in 1964 in Tokyo. That's how volleyball came about. All right, let's switch it up. Let's go to Gardner, Massachusetts. Here's the city that this mansion is located in. So it was named after Colonel Thomas Gardner. He was wounded in the Battle of Bunker Hill. And this town was huge in industry, huge. And because they started opening sawmills, liveries, blacksmith, dry goods stores, and several woodworking factories. And that's a huge part of the history. They were, in the 1800s, manufacturing chairs and other wood furniture. And it had a total of 12 furniture companies that would make 1.2 million chairs annually and employed a workforce of over 850 people. So it's huge in that area. Gardner eventually became known as, quote, the chair city of the world, and they have a 20-foot chair that stands, I don't know where it stands, but it's like a testimony to Gardner's history in chair manufacturing. In the 1800s, also, that's, all these factories are thriving and being built, and so growth was huge during that time. It also got electricity in 1891, and then the Gardner Electric Railway started operation in 1894, again bringing in more and more people. A man named Edward G. Watkins, he was an employee for one of the furniture manufacturers known as Haywood Brothers. He actually created a time recording device to keep track of the hours worked by employees. So easy to use, he actually named it Simplex. And so it is where a time clock for employees was started. The phrase punching the clock became a part of our lingo because of it. So he opened the Simplex Time Recorder Company, 1901, and he actually still worked at Haywood Brothers building furniture until about 1918, when he decided to devote his whole time to Simplex and his time machine, you know what I mean. But I thought that was pretty cool. I actually, you don't think of stuff like that, but and then coming the 20th century, changes are crazy in Gardner. A lot of the furniture manufacturers stopped producing. They were transferred to the South or overseas, sadly. But it's still known as the furniture capital of New England because it still has a ton of furniture store outlets, and there are still manufacturers that are in play in the boundaries of New England. So that was just a little history spot for you. We're going to get started because this place is so scary and so haunted, and I'm so pumped for it. So it's called the S.K. Pierce Mansion, and his name is Sylvester Knowlton Pierce. That's what the S.K. Pierce stands for. I'm going to read an article first. I'm going to quote it because it is a great introduction to the mansion, and then I'm going to jump into more detail, more haunting stuff. It's going to be amazing. So this is an article by Alyssa Fornatino. Sure. It's called How the S.K. Pierce Mansion Became One of the Most Haunted Homes in Massachusetts. And this was published October 27th of 2021. Let's go ahead and get started with it. So, quote, more than 3,000 people have joined a waiting list to stay the night once the house is open to the public. Towering over the corner of West Broadway and Union Street in Gardner, Massachusetts, the S.K. Pierce Mansion demands attention. From the outside, with its gray siding and black shutters, the classic Victorian is the perfect archetype of a haunted house. Inside, things are even darker. So dark, in fact, that the couple who owned the home from 2008 to 2015 only lived there for 2 years before they felt they had no choice but to move out. But unlike most other notoriously haunted homes in the country, the S.K. Pierce Mansion was never the scene of any infamous crime. Rather, it was the dream home of a wealthy businessman and his family that, upon its completion in 1875, very quickly turned into a nightmare. The mansion, which spans a daunting 6,661 square feet, so if you're superstitious about numbers, 666 is in there. Sorry about that. Is named after its original owner, the successful furniture manufacturer Sylvester Knowlton Pierce. Decked out with the state-of-the-art features including gas lighting in every room, a massive Winthrop furnace, and running water throughout it, it was a marvel for its time. Pierce spared no expense when building the 3-story home, but sadly he barely had time to enjoy the fruits of his labor before tragedy struck. Just 2 weeks after moving in, Pierce's wife Susan died from a flesh-eating bacterial infection. Gross. Unfortunately, she would not be the last Pierce family member to die in the house. After S.K. Pierce died at home in 1888, the house was willed to his second wife, Ellen Pierce, who also eventually died there. The mansion was left to S.K.'s 3 sons, who spent years fighting over ownership of the family home and the furniture business until the 2 eldest sons finally moved away. However, gaining control over the Victorian did not result in success or happiness for the youngest son, Edward Pierce. Tragically, his 2-year-old daughter, Rachel Pierce, died in the home of a bacterial infection. What the heck? Gross. Ugh. Later, after the Great Depression depleted the family fortune, Edward and his wife converted the mansion into a boarding house to make ends meet. By 1965, the house was falling apart and Edward was forced to give it away to a friend, transferring ownership outside of the Pierce family for the first time since the house's construction. The 5th and final person confirmed to have died in the mansion was Eno Sowry. I'm sorry if I said that wrong. A Gardner resident and a World War II veteran who lived there during the days it was a boarding house. In 1963, he burned to death at age 49 in the main bedroom after his mattress mysteriously caught fire. Since then, several visitors and former residents describe having a similar experience in the main bedroom. Just for a second, they're met with the fleeting scent of something burning. The spirits of the late Pierce family members are said to make their presence known too. There are many stories of a childlike spirit, thought to be Rachel Pierce, playing in the rooms on the 3rd floor. Eerily, though, these 5 are not the only spirits lingering around the house. In the 2 years that Edwin Gonzalez and Lillian Otero lived there, which in 2009 to 2011, multiple neighbors described seeing a little boy with quote, yellow hair running back and forth between the windows, which is decidedly more creepy when you consider the fact that the couple didn't have children. but their own personal experiences in the home were far more terrifying. In addition to disembodied footsteps, slamming doors, and objects moving on their own, Edwin and Lillian encountered multiple entities throughout the house, including a shadow figure in the basement, a dark-haired woman with a creepy smile who may or may not have tried to possess Lillian, full of horrible anecdotes like these. Their stories eventually became the subject of a book, Bones in the Basement by Joni Mayhan. Spoiler, yes, there were bones in the basement. Shadow figures and possessions aside, it's worth noting that not all of the ghosts in the S.K. Pierce mansion are dark and menacing. Since the early 2000s, countless psychic mediums, and paranormal investigative groups have visited the house, most of them describing the same few spirits each time, including Maddie Cornwall, the young nanny who cared for the Pierce children. It's believed that the mansion was the only place that really felt like home to her, and that her spirit acts as a protector of the house, keeping the other spirits in check and warding off any unwelcome trespassers. But soon, the haunted Victorian will open its doors and invite the public in. The current owners, who bought the home sight unseen in April 2015, plan to open it for historical tours and overnight stays once they're finished renovating. According to Ken Watson, the home's curator, more than 3,000 people from all over the world have already joined the waiting list to spend the night. So are you with them? I really like that article. I think it was a great introduction to the house before I get into other information about it. So yes, Sylvester Pierce, he was a furniture manufacturer, very, very wealthy, and his company was called S.K. Pierce and Sons Furniture Company. Huge, huge success, especially in Gardner, with really literally known as the Chair City. So in the 1880s, he wanted to build a mansion. He considered himself a man of high public stature, and he wanted a mansion to reflect that. So again, it's 6,661 square feet, and it has 10 bedrooms and took 100 men a year and a half to build. It features carved moldings and cornices. I don't know. I didn't look that one up. I'm so sorry, but those are all over the home, literally hand carved. And there's so much detail in this house, and it's all like hand done, painstakingly done to make it this masterpiece. Even from like the master bedroom all the way down to the servants' quarters, like so much detail. A lot of famous people have also stayed at the home as guests, like President Calvin Coolidge, the Minnesota Fats. I didn't look that up. I think I skipped right over it when I was doing this. I don't know what that is, but there you go. Betty Davis, P.T. Barnum, and Norman Rockwell, and also was a meeting place for the Freemason Society. So Pierce and his wife and their son, they were so excited about this mansion. They, had dreamed of being in this massive home, but sadly, just like we had talked about this weeks after they moved in, Susan had this bacterial flesh-eating disease, and she had passed away just, weeks after they moved in. He mourned for a year, S.K. Pierce did, and he married a woman. Her name was Ellen Pierce, and she was 30 years his junior and had 2 more children with her. So again, he passed in 1888, and then Ellen passed a couple years later, and so the 3 sons were fighting over the ownership of the mansion and the business. And what impacted it was the Great Depression. It hit the business very, very hard, and so then the other 2 brothers moved away, and their youngest son, Edward, he took control of the mansion. And it had its hard times. The family fortune was disappearing, especially because of the Great Depression and afterwards. And so Edward decided to change it into a boarding home. And with that, a lot of negative and dangerous things were happening. There was drinking, gambling, and prostitution was like the norm in this boarding house. There's been tales of murder. And it said that one of the prostitutes was strangled in what they called the red bedroom on the second floor. And she was strangled by another boarder that was staying there. We had talked about Sari. He was a Finnish immigrant and he burned to death in the master bedroom, but people actually believe that it was spontaneous combustion because there was very, very little damage to the rest of the room. Something to think about. And there is a story of a young boy being drowned in the basement. I don't know how he was drowned in the basement, but that's what it said. And so throughout the years, because of all of this horror, it has become such a haunted mansion, and people are proving that there is serious paranormal activity inside. People see the ghost of S.K. Pierce, his first wife Susan, his youngest son Edward, and then the nanny Maddie Cornwell. They also believe to find a man named David. He is believed to be the Red Room Strangler. And then the prostitute, you also see her in the Red Room. There's also a young boy and a young girl who they believe might be the granddaughter of S.K. Pierce. And then the Finnish immigrant, I'm sorry if I'm butchering it. It's so hard to read. They believe that you also see him in addition to other dark entities, especially in the basement. So there's a lot of ghosts taking up residence in this place. A lot of the guests have reported voices, chanting, full body apparitions, furniture moving, screens flying off the windows, slamming doors, the sounds of footsteps on the stairs in the hall, sudden temperature changes, foul odors, shadow people, and an ominous lion roar, which can shake the house. And people believe that it is S.K. Pierce, the lion roar, like saying how much he hates how the state of the home is or the people that are in the home. Like, that is creepy and freaking random. Just a lion roar out of nowhere that's shaking the entire house. That's not scary, right? There's also reports of feeling the pressure of hands on them and being pushed. There was a visitor that felt like she was being pushed down the stairs, and then one that says they felt like they were being forced out of a window on the third floor. That's not fun. So a lot of paranormal people have come in and they have said that it is, quote, the most advanced they've ever seen, the paranormal activity that's going on. And that they believe that the entities there are actually harnessing electric energy, and that's how they're converting their power so they're able to move the large objects and be physical with people and their surroundings. That's so creepy. Like the most advanced. So there's some smart ghosties there. And others have like related it to it has like the charm of the Addams Family home, but then others are like, no, it's more like the Bates Motel from Psycho. Take that how you want. But that it says that paranormal researchers and mediums have pronounced it certified haunted. So there you go, guys. When I was doing the research, it was for sale a lot and handed down all this stuff. So I actually looked up the mansion, and you can see pictures of it on realtor.com. So I have the link in the show notes if you'd like to see it, or you literally just type in S.K. Pierce Mansion, and if you can't find it in that search, you could do like realtor.com or whatever. But it looks like a really cool house, really pretty. But I could tell how it could be super ominous. So Yeah, it has 10 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms. It's 6,661 square feet on a 0.23 acre lot. So insane. But yeah, go on to realtor.com. It is there. The links in the show notes. All right, so we're not quite done. I have a scary story, and then Ghost Adventures went there with my man Zaki Baby, and I know there's controversy lately, but we're just going to skip over that and just talk about what it was like when he was there. But I'm going to read this article word for word because it is their experience at the mansion. I want it to be exactly how they said it. So this comes from Chair City Spirits, and it says investigating paranormal activity at S.K. Pierce Mansion. This is by Nicole Colson and was written April 27th of 2017. So quote, before reaching the front door of the S.K. Pierce Victorian Mansion in South Gardner, Massachusetts, for some paranormal investigation early this month, I could see its cupola over the tops of the surrounding buildings. As I got closer, I could see the house looming over the street in all its haunted glory, looking like a giant macabre dollhouse with its gingerbread trim and mansard roof. I remember thinking it looked like the dwelling of Gomez and Morticia Adams, or maybe the house where Norman Bates' mother resides. With all the stories I'd heard and read about the house, it would make sense if I quickly turned the car around and headed home instead of approaching the giant ornate door to spend the evening ghost hunting, but instead I was bursting with the thrill of the unknown behind that door. I'd been looking forward to this excursion since I'd made the reservation a few months before. The event was hosted by the 555 Paranormal Productions, a series led by keen psychic medium Brandy Wells. 555 means at each historic location there are 5 parapsychics who serve as tour guides, lead investigators, film crew, psychics, and paranormalists. 5 hours of paranormal investigation and 5 cameras recording footage produced by the psychics and film crew so attendees can have a DVD to commemorate their experience. There were a couple of reasons I was intrigued by the idea of visiting the S.K. Pierce Mansion. One being a story I'd been told by a man who visited the house and left with mysterious scratches from an unknown source on the back of his neck. I'd also read on the mansion's website that visitors need to sign a detailed injury waiver before entering because, quote, the entities in this mansion are extremely advanced and have demonstrated a unique ability to impose their will physically on guests. Another warning was issued to not behave in, quote, in an antagonistic manner towards these entities at any time, as you may be placing yourself and other guests in danger. After attending the 2 other paranormal investigation events led by Wells, I admittedly become somewhat of a ghost hunting addict. So of course I had to see what the fuss was all about here. She does go into detail about the history, but we've already been over that, and it is literally the exact same of what I've just said. So I have skipped over the part. So continuing on in the article, quote, the mansion has the distinction of being cited as the 2nd most haunted house in Massachusetts and the 9th most haunted in the country. Well-known paranormal groups from the TV shows Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures, and My Ghost Story have visited the house to investigate the paranormal activity there. Over the years, countless stories of paranormal activity in the house have been recorded. Among the ghosts reported are that of S.K. Pierce himself, his first wife Susan, his son Edward, a nanny named Maddie Cornwell, a man named David, believed to have committed the murder of the prostitute in what's known as the Red Room on the 2nd floor, 2 young children, and Eno Sari, who reportedly still likes to play a hand of poker with visitors. Edwin Gonzalez and Lillian Otero purchased the house in 2008 and only lasted 2 years there. During that time, they experienced a lot of paranormal activity, probably the most chilling being Otero's message from a spirit to walk down to the basement and dig in an old kiln, where she found several old bones, one of which was identified as a child's pelvic bone. Author Joni Mahan wrote about the couple's experience in her 2014 book, Bones in the Basement. In June 2015, after only being on the real estate market for 2 weeks, Rob and Allison Conti bought the house sight unseen and turned it into an attraction. Only within the past year have they opened the house for overnight stays. They are also in the midst of a significant renovation project on the house. It's now filled with empty rooms waiting to be furnished, adding to its spooky factor. Guests have experienced every kind of activity, from hearing voices, seeing full-body apparitions, to moving furniture, phantom footsteps, and slamming doors, feeling sudden temperature changes, and smelling foul odors. There was one report of a visitor being pushed down a flight of stairs. I experienced none of these phenomena during my visit, but that doesn't mean I didn't have my own experiences with the paranormal that night. Nothing was shocking me only because I'd attended paranormal investigations and I knew what to expect. I could sum it up best by saying I could feel spirit energy all over the house, which was measured by the team of psychics in many ways using different pieces of ghost hunting equipment. The group of about 25 of us was split into smaller groups, each then rotated to a different location in the house to investigate with each of the 5 team leaders. My group, which consisted of my 2 travel companions and 2 others, worked more closely with Colleen Costello, a Massachusetts psychic medium featured on the program Paranormal Lockdown. We investigated several rooms in the dark together, including the infamous Red Room, the nanny's room, billiards room, and nursery. Because Costello is a talented psychic medium, she was able to deliver messages she was receiving from the entities in each room. It's believed we heard the voice of a spirit of the murder victim in the Red Room on the spirit box, a battery-powered device that uses radio frequencies to capture spirit voices. We also heard from the spirit of Maddie Cornwell, the nanny, who communicated with us by answering yes or no questions by turning on a couple of flashlights. One thing was certain, she did not like having a man, which was one of our team leaders, in the room because she wouldn't communicate until he left. An interesting occurrence took place in the billiards room, where I had an encounter with what was believed to be the spirit of P.T. Barnum. I communicated with the spirit with the use of a pair of dowsing rods, divination tools that respond to spirit energy. The rods were so active when I asked questions that it became the joke of the night that P.T. Barnum liked me. In the basement, we encountered a spirit Costello determined was of someone who had worked for the Pierce family and had some unresolved business because he'd been falsely accused by them for something. All I remember is my pendulum, another divination tool I'd brought, was swinging wildly in the basement, picking up on some significant energy. None of the energy I felt in the mansion was malevolent. Nothing like what others had experienced in the past. It was simply fascinating. Costello was the only person in our group who reported some concrete evidence of the paranormal. In the middle of the night, she spent the entire night there. She heard mystery footsteps up the stairs to the 2nd floor where she was staying. She double-checked with everyone staying at the house to make sure it hadn't been one of them climbing the stairs in the middle of the night. The only others awake at the time were downstairs in the dining room. My travel group decided to drive home at about midnight and forego staying the night, so we missed out on the action. Next time, I will most definitely spend the night, even if I have to bring an air mattress and camp out on the floor. I'd have to say the most concrete paranormal evidence I gathered on my own without the use of tools was at the beginning of the evening, where the distinct sweet scent of pipe tobacco was in my nostrils. A few others around me smelled it too, although there is no smoking allowed in the house. I was told there had once been a caretaker of the mansion who smoked a pipe. Maybe I do have the gift after all. I just really liked her. She didn't have a huge experience like some of the ones that she described, but I think I really liked her view on it. All right, lastly here, we are going to go visit Zachy baby as he goes to the S.K. Pierce mansion. So I did watch the episode. It is very, very good. I highly recommend it. So I'm just going through my notes here. So Zach at one time was speaking with Edwin Gonzalez and Lillian Otero, who we spoke about earlier. Zach is asking questions about how the house made them feel and to really describe their goings on there. And Edwin says that he really believes that they have suffered demonic oppression and possession. And, they hear footsteps, voices, children. And Lillian recounts a story where she went to bed. She likes to lay face down or on her stomach. And she felt a presence behind her holding her down on the bed. She said she felt completely paralyzed and she screamed for Edwin. And so Edwin said quote, she kept screaming, "Get her off of me." And I couldn't help her. So I guess Lillian said she said a quick prayer and then all of a sudden she was able to move. But they decided that would be the last night they were going to stay in the house. So while they're setting up their nerve center, Zach and Aaron go into the house to turn on their static X cams that they use. And while they were in there, they heard a very loud bang coming from the attic. So of course they instantly ready to investigate, and they began asking questions, and all of them came back with a response of a loud bang. So they went all the way up to the attic, checked windows, and tried to debunk the noises. And, there was no way that the shutters in there could have made those bangs, and there was no wind. So they believe something intelligent was talking to them. During the investigation, Zach asked the presence in the house to manifest itself. And then Zach and Aaron both started seeing this mist apparition appearing, but it was not caught on camera. And so he asked, do it again. And they didn't see it that time, but the X cam actually picked up a large orb near the ceiling where it cuts into the room where Zach and Aaron were standing. And so Nick was at the nerve center with the other guys, and they saw it. And so they walkie-talkied them and told them what they were able to capture on the camera. They bring Edwin into the house. I don't know how he was okay with that, but and they wanted to do some spirit box sessions, and they actually started in the basement. And this is where Lillian reported that she saw a shadow figure. So again, in the basement, they saw this mist-like anomaly next to Zach. And so Zach asked, "Can you please tell me the gentleman's name that is here with us now?" The spirit box replied, "He's here." They weren't sure who he was referring to, but they thought it might be Edward Pierce because he had actually died where they were sitting. Zach then, they all went up to the third floor to do more spirit box sessions, and they actually received some really intelligent responses. Zach asked if the spirits remember Edwin, and a little girl's voice came in very, very shyly and quiet. It said, "Hi." Then they let Edwin ask about the house, and they asked if they wanted Edwin and Lillian to leave the house. And there was a voice that came through, very strong, "No." And then they asked if they wanted to sell the house. It said, "Not sure." So this was recorded when Edwin and Lillian still owned the home. If that wasn't, sorry. But yes, they later sold the home and is now owned by the person who does the attractions and stuff. So anyways, Zach asks if they can name the woman that lives in the house with Edwin, and they did not receive an answer. So then Edwin asks the same exact question, and a voice of an older woman very sweetly replies, "Lillian?" That's scary. Oh my God. And so with that, they decide to go back to Nerve Center to review their evidence. And so Zach and Aaron are not quite done. They go back into the house, and they are, of course, trying to provoke the evil spirit of the house into attacking them because they're dumb. And that's sad because what we read too is you have to sign disclosures and stuff not to do that. So that was this was before the waivers, all that stuff. So, but still, come on. Aaron goes to the basement, and Zach goes upstairs to the red room, which is also the master bedroom. And nothing actually happened to either of the guys when they were alone. But Aaron goes and joins Zach in the room, and they found a very weird EVP. So they are asking the spirit to grab their foot and drag them out of the room. That does not happen, but they go to sleep on their recorder. Interesting. And that was it. Those were kind of the big things that really popped out during the investigation, but it was a really good episode, very creepy. I highly recommend it. So that is it for today for episode 44 in the S.K. Pierce Mansion in Gardner, Massachusetts. Join me tomorrow. We have a bonus dark tale tomorrow. It is so creepy. I think you guys are going to love it. So definitely check that out tomorrow. Next Wednesday, we are going to be going to New Mexico. We will also have a new Zodiac episode on the 23rd. We're going to be exploring Taurus. And then to finish off April, we're going to be going to Michigan. Super fun. I'm so excited. So thank you all for listening. It's been amazing seeing all the activity on my little website. It's very, very cool. I'm so appreciative of you guys doing this. It takes a lot of time and a lot of work, and I love doing the research, but there are some times where I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. And like today, I have a massive headache. I really didn't want to do this, but I pushed through, and here we are. So thank you guys for your support to really keep me going. So you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. TikTok is a little preview of the episode, and YouTube is the full episode if you guys would rather listen to it there. And I have a Patreon if you guys would like to support the show. Again, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you tomorrow for our bonus dark tale. Bye, guys.